The Loner. In the quiet town of Dandy, nestled deep within a dense, ancient forest, there lived a man named Edgar. He was known as the Loner, a figure rarely seen outside the confines of his decaying cottage. Hidden away from the prying eyes of the townsfolk, Edgar's presence sent shivers down the spines of those who dared approach his home, for his solitude was as impenetrable as the woods that surrounded him. As the years passed, rumors began to circulate about strange occurrences in Dandy. Whispers of ethereal lights dancing beneath the thick canopy, and eerie cries that echoed through the night. Some believed it was the wind playing tricks, but others, the brave souls who dared venture close to Edgar's domain, knew better. One fateful autumn evening, as a harvest moon cast long, eerie shadows across Hollowbrook, a group of intrepid teenagers decided to unravel the mysteries that shrouded Edgar's cottage. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they approached cautiously, their breaths hanging heavy in the cool night air. The air grew colder as they drew nearer, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The cottage, its timbers groaning with age, stood before them, its windows dark and foreboding. The scent of rot and decay hung heavy, blending with the damp earth and fallen leaves. Summoning their courage, they pushed open the creaking door, revealing a world frozen in time. Cobwebs hung like silken tapestries, and dust danced in the beams of their flashlights. A suffocating silence enveloped them, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon a room unlike any other, filled with arcane symbols etched into the wooden floor. Shadows danced along the walls, casting twisted, contorted shapes that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. At the center of the room, a weathered journal lay open, its pages filled with cryptic writings and sketches of grotesque creatures. Suddenly a voice, low and guttural, emanated from the shadows. "You should not have come," it hissed, chilling the blood in their veins. They turned, flashlights trembling, to face the figure that had emerged from the darkness. It was Edgar, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. His once frail form seemed to swell with an otherworldly power. The air grew thick with an innameable dread, suffocating the intruders. "You have trespassed where you do not belong," Edgar intoned, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance. "Now, you shall become part of the forest's lament, forever entwined with its secrets." As he spoke, the very ground beneath them seemed to pulse, roots and vines slithering forth like serpents, entwining them in a suffocating embrace. The teenagers' cries echoed through the cottage, mingling with the haunting cries that had haunted Dandy for generations. From that night on, Dandy became a place shunned by all, for the forest held its secrets tighter than ever, and the legend of the Loner, Edgar, grew darker. A cautionary tale whispered to children who dared wander too far into the woods, for in the heart of those ancient trees, the souls of the intruders lingered, forever bound to the enigmatic Loner and the forest that guarded his terrible secret. Whispers in the fog. In a remote village, nestled between mist-covered hills and ancient forests, a sinister presence dwelled. Shrouded in darkness, it was a place where secrets clung like cobwebs to forgotten corners, and where the wind carried whispers of long-forgotten tales. One fateful night, as Sarah Hawthorne walked home from the village square, an uneasy feeling settled in her chest. And beknownst to her, a pair of malevolent eyes followed her every step. Hidden in the cloak of night, the stalker, a figure woven from shadows, moved like a specter, slipping through the spaces between worlds. His breath was shallow, his heart pounding like a drumbeat of dread as he trailed Sarah's graceful silhouette. Days turned to weeks, and Sarah felt the haunting presence drawing closer. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, and she heard footsteps echo through the empty lanes. Fear clawed at her soul, but she could not escape the feeling of being watched. Late one moonlit evening, Sarah summoned her courage and confronted her fears. She chose a different path, winding through the misty woods that bordered the village. The ancient trees whispered secrets, but Sarah felt a strange comfort in their embrace. As she ventured deeper, a twig snapped, and a voice, cold and distant, rasped through the still air. "You can't hide forever, Sarah." The stalker had found her. Panic surged through her veins, But Sarah's survival instincts took over. She sprinted through the gnarled trees, heart pounding in rhythm with the relentless pursuit. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of twisted roots and grasping branches. Just when hope seemed lost, a dim light flickered in the distance. Sarah ran toward it, stumbling into a clearing where an ancient, abandoned cabin stood, cloaked in ivy and decay. Desperation pushed her forward. She swung open the creaking door, revealing a forgotten world frozen in time. Cobwebs adorned the corners, and dust motes danced in the moonlight. Sarah barricaded herself inside, her breath ragged and labored. She scanned the room, searching for anything that might offer salvation. In a forgotten chest, she discovered an old, weathered journal. As she read the entries, Sarah realized she wasn't alone. The cabin had been a refuge for another soul, a girl who had faced her own darkness in these very walls. She had left behind a warning: the shadows know your name, but they can't have you. Time seemed to blur, but the stalker's voice grew nearer. Suddenly, the cabin seemed to tremble, as if it were a living, breathing entity. Guarding its secrets, the shadows within coalesced, swirling and shifting into a form both ethereal and fierce. With a surge of power, the spirit of the forgotten girl confronted the stalker. The room filled with an otherworldly light, and a scream echoed through the night, fading into the wind. When the dawn finally broke, the village awoke to a world forever changed. The ancient cabin stood silent, its secrets buried within its walls. Sarah emerged, changed but alive, the haunting memory etched into her soul. From that day on, the villagers spoke of the girl who faced the shadows and emerged stronger, and of the cabin in the woods, where the spirits of the past guarded against those who would do harm. But the stalker, he was never seen again. Some say he vanished into the very darkness he had embraced. A warning for those who dare to tread where they do not belong. The Midnight Visitor. It was a stormy night, the wind howling like a pack of wolves outside, and the rain pelting the windows relentlessly. Emma sat huddled on the couch, her heart pounding in rhythm with the thunder. She was home alone, a situation she was usually comfortable with, but tonight was different. Tonight, there was an eerie feeling in the air. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden knock on the front door made her jump. She froze, her eyes fixed on the entrance. Who could be out there in this weather? Her mind raced, but curiosity got the better of her, and she cautiously approached the door. With trembling hands, she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. Rain poured in, dampening the floor in front of her. In the dim light, she could barely make out a silhouette, a figure drenched from head to toe. "Please help me," a voice whispered, barely audible over the raging storm. Emma's heart raced even faster. She didn't recognize this person, and something about them seemed off, but compassion overtook her fear, and she swung the door open wider, inviting the stranger inside. The intruder stumbled in, shivering and soaked. They wore tattered clothes, and their face was obscured by shadows. Emma couldn't help but feel a surge of pity for this person, abandoned and vulnerable in the heart of the storm. "Thank you," the stranger murmured, their voice a hoarse rasp. Emma offered a towel and a warm drink, trying to get a better look at them. As they dried off, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The air seemed to grow colder, and an icy dread settled in her stomach. Emma offered a towel and a warm drink, trying to get a better look at them. As they dried off, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The air seemed to grow colder, and an icy dread settled in her stomach. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, revealing the stranger's face. It was a face Emma knew all too well, a face she had seen in her nightmares for years. It was the face of her deceased brother, David, who had met a tragic end in these very walls. Terror surged through Emma, her breath hitching. This was impossible. David was gone, lost to the darkness that had haunted her dreams. Yet here he stood, dripping wet and as pale as a ghost. Emma stumbled backward, her mind racing for an escape. But before she could react, David's voice filled the room again. But this time it held an unearthly resonance. "You should have let me rest, Emma," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. Emma's legs gave way, and she fell to the floor. Her screams lost in the storm. David, or whatever this twisted apparition was, advanced toward her. A cold smile etched on his face as the clock struck 1. The storm outside seemed to reach a crescendo, as if echoing Emma's horror. The house was alive with malevolence, and Emma knew she was trapped in a nightmare that she could never wake from. And so, the intruder who had come in from the storm was not David at all. It was something darker. Something that had taken her brother's form to haunt her forever. In the confines of that wretched house, Emma's fate was sealed, and the chilling echo of her screams reverberated through the night, blending seamlessly with the relentless howl of the wind. Whispering Woods. Deep in the heart of the countryside lay a forest, known as Whispering Woods. Its name was earned for the soft, eerie whispers that seemed to emanate from its ancient trees, carrying secrets untold through the rustling leaves. Legend had it that the forest was cursed, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead grew thin. Few dared to enter, and those who did were never the same again. One moonless night, Sarah, a curious and adventurous soul, decided to explore the fabled woods, armed with a dim flashlight and fueled by youthful bravado. She ventured in, ignoring the ominous feeling that settled in her bones. As Sarah delved deeper, the trees seemed to close in around her, their twisted branches reaching for her like skeletal fingers. Shadows danced between the trunks, and the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of ghostly voices murmuring secrets she could not decipher. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died, leaving her in suffocating darkness. Panic surged through her veins as she fumbled for her phone, praying for a glimmer of light. Just as her trembling fingers found it, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, followed by an eerie, guttural laugh. Sarah's heart raced, and she forced herself to move forward. Guided only by the pale light of her phone, the forest seemed to shift around her, as if mocking her attempts to find her way. The whispers grew more frantic, almost desperate, as if the very trees were trying to warn her. Then, a sudden, chilling breeze swept through the forest, carrying with it a scent of decay. Sarah's breath itched, and she froze, her senses on high alert. She could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, drawing nearer. She turned, her phone casting eerie shadows on the trees. And there, just beyond the feeble glow, stood a figure cloaked in darkness. Its eyes gleamed with an unholy light, and a malevolent grin twisted its twisted features. The figure took a step closer, and Sarah's instincts kicked in. She turned and ran, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The forest seemed to conspire against her, roots and branches reaching out to trip her, but she pressed on, fueled by sheer terror. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah burst through the trees and into the moonlit clearing. She didn't stop until she was well beyond the forest's edge, her chest heaving, and her legs trembling, as she looked back at the looming trees of Whispering Woods. She knew she had narrowly escaped something unspeakable. The forest held secrets darker than any could fathom, and it hungered for the souls of those who dared to trespass. From that night on, Sarah never spoke of her harrowing encounter, but the memory of those malevolent eyes and the haunting whispers would forever haunt her dreams. And she knew, deep down, that Whispering Woods was a place best left untouched, a realm of darkness and dread that should forever remain in the realm of legends and nightmares. The Cursed Mansion. At the outskirts of a desolate town stood a dilapidated mansion, its stone walls weathered by time, and its windows shattered like eyes blinded by terror. Locals whispered of the horrors that lurked within, and they spoke of the cursed grounds on which it sat, a place marked by ancient malevolence. The house had a name, once, the Mercer Estate, but it had become known as something else, something darker, the Widow's Lair. Legend told of a woman named Eliza Mercer, who had once lived there with her husband, Victor. Their love was the envy of the town, until tragedy struck. Victor was claimed by a fever, leaving Eliza heartbroken and alone. It was said that Eliza never truly accepted Victor's death. She wandered the halls of the mansion, her once bright eyes now hollow and distant. The townsfolk saw her only in glimpses, a ghostly figure drifting through the windows, her face veiled in mourning. As the years passed, The place seemed to take on a life of its own. The air grew heavy with a suffocating sadness, and the wind carried the mournful wails of a woman long lost to grief. Shadows danced in the corners of the rooms, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets that only the brave or the foolhardy dared to hear. One fateful night, a curious soul named Samuel, drawn by the lure of the macabre, decided to venture into the widow's lair. Armed with nothing but a flickering lantern and a heart full of trepidation, he stepped across the threshold. The air grew colder, and the silence seemed to stretch endlessly. Samuel's footsteps echoed through the empty halls, each one a testament to the oppressive weight that hung in the air. He ascended the grand staircase, the wood groaning beneath him, and entered a room that had once been a sanctuary for love. In the flickering light of his lantern, Samuel saw her Eliza Mercer, or what remained of her. Her once vibrant gown hung in tatters, and her hair cascaded like a curtain of darkness. Her eyes, pools of sorrow, turned to him, locking his gaze in a vice of despair. "Who dares disturb my lament?" her voice echoed, carrying the weight of centuries. Samuel's voice trembled as he stammered an apology, but it was too late. The room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the walls closed in, suffocating him. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of sorrow and regret that threatened to consume him whole. With every ounce of strength he possessed, Samuel fled, the night air cool against his sweat-soaked skin, and didn't stop until he was far from the cursed mansion. From that night on, Samuel carried the weight of the widow's lair with him. The memory of Eliza's sorrowful eyes etched into his soul, and he knew, as the townsfolk had known for generations, that some places are better left to the ghosts and the shadows, forever to be remembered in whispers and cow. 3 wolves. Once, in a forgotten corner of the world, nestled deep within a shadowy forest, there lay a desolate glen known as Three Wolves Hollow. Legend had it that the spirits of 3 ancient wolves roamed the hollow, bound by a curse that tormented them for eternity. The villagers spoke of the wolves in hushed whispers, for their tale was one of terror and woe. It was said that these wolves were once protectors of the forest, guardians of nature's delicate balance, but something malevolent had befallen them, twisting their once noble souls into something dark and monstrous. As night fell, a chilling fog crept through the gnarled trees, shrouding the hollow in an ethereal mist. It was on such a night that 3 unsuspecting travelers, seeking shelter from the encroaching darkness, stumbled upon Three Wolves Hollow. As they entered, the air grew icy, and the forest seemed to close in around them, whispering secrets too ancient to comprehend. The travelers pressed on, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the sinister pulse of the woods. Suddenly, a mournful howl pierced the silence, followed by 2 more, each more haunting than the last. The travelers turned to see 3 pairs of piercing, ghostly eyes glinting through the fog. The 3 wolves, their fur as white as the moon, emerged from the shadows, their spectral forms shimmering with an eerie luminescence. The leader of the pack, known as Gavriel, bore the mark of a long-forgotten battle, his ethereal paws stained with the blood of his foes. Beside him, Luna, with eyes like twin orbs of ghostly fire, exuded an otherworldly grace. And finally, Fenrir, the largest of them all, with fur as dark as the abyss, radiated a menacing presence that sent shivers down the spines of the travelers. The wolves encircled the trespassers, their mournful howls echoing in the hollow. Panic gripped the travelers, for they knew they were at the mercy of these cursed beasts. With every passing moment, the forest seemed to close in tighter, suffocating them. Then, the wolves spoke, their voices a haunting symphony of sorrow and rage, recounting their tragic tale of betrayal and vengeance. They had been bound by a dark sorcerer, condemned to wander the hollow for all eternity, seeking retribution against those who had wronged them. The travelers, now paralyzed with fear, begged for mercy, pleading for their lives, but the wolves were beyond reason, consumed by a thirst for revenge that could never be quenched. In a flash of spectral light, the wolves lunged, their forms melding with the mist, becoming one with the darkness. The travelers' screams were swallowed by the hollow, leaving only an eerie silence in their wake. And so, the legend of Three Wolves Hollow continued, a cautionary tale whispered through generations, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks within even the most sacred of places. For those who dare to enter the hollow, beware, for the curse of the three wolves endures, and the price of trespassing is paid in blood and terror.